Well, Justin Long is first up today. Justin has been involved in missions since 1990, beginning with the Association of International Mission Services and the World Christian Encyclopedia. He led the development of strategicnetwork.org in 2000 and supported research efforts in Southeast Asia from 2004 to 2008. As the Director of Global Research at Beyond since 2009, he documents movements to Christ and serves the 2414 network while editing the weekly roundup for mission leaders worldwide. Welcome, Justin. Looking forward to hearing from you. Over to you.
Thanks, Dan. Morning, everybody. I'm going to switch to a screen share. That's up. Everyone can see it? I'm going to assume that is a yes. Great. Okay. So this morning's session is basically titled A Biblical Basis of Missions Research. And I took this in a couple of ways that I felt I've been being led in, and I hope that it's useful to you too. We're going to start with some basic concepts about missions research. There's some basic questions that people ask. We're going to start in the scriptures. So the first one, of course, is this one from Genesis 2. This is possibly the first research project ever. God brings the animals to man, and man names them. I have thought it interesting to think about this particular verse and ask, who exactly is the researcher here? Is it man who's naming the animals, or is it God researching what man will name them? It's kind of an interesting question to think about. You can't talk about numbering and quantitative research without bringing up this particular one. This is one that sometimes people refer to say this is why we shouldn't count numbers. Actually, no, that's the next one. This is the one in Numbers 13. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. This is the one where they sent the spies into the land of Canaan to map out the land. And after 40 days, so this is a 40-day field research project when Joshua sent the spies into Canaan. Then we come to this one, which is an interesting one. The anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he incited David against them, saying, "Go, number Israel and Judah." So frequently I've heard this particular story as a reason why we should not count numbers, because this is clearly something that is not good. There's another version of this, though, in 1 Chronicles 21 that says Satan stood against Israel and incited David to number Israel. Now, I'm a missions researcher. I'm not a theologian. I won't attempt to reconcile theologically those two particular stories. I don't know how to do that. However, I will say that whenever we encounter this sort of thing, there's also several instances where God told them to number the warriors. So Numbers 1, record the names of the warriors. Numbers 26, record the names of the warriors. And it actually has numbers of the total number of warriors within each of the tribes. And then even in Nehemiah 7, God gave me the idea to call together the nobles and the leaders along with the ordinary citizens for registration. And if you look through there, they've got numbers of all the people. So these are times when a census was appropriate. So there's a number of instances in Scripture where forms of research are talked about. I think one of the best examples to me is this one from Luke, where at the very beginning he says, "Many have undertaken to draw up an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us, just as they were handed down to us. And with this in mind, since I myself have carefully investigated," there's research for you, "everything from the beginning, I too decided to write an orderly account." This is the very definition of, I have a great affinity with Luke. Luke is carefully investigating and writing an orderly account so that you may know the certainty. That's another thing we love in research, is the certainty. Actually, in some of the conversation at the very beginning of our time together, we were talking about a little bit about verified data and certainty and information on the ground. Luke has a great affinity with this idea. We can also see this in Acts 17. Now, the Berean Jews were of more noble character than those in Thessalonica, for they received the message with great eagerness, and they examined the scriptures. This is more theological research here, every day to see if what Paul said was true. So again, now we're coming to, we first have this element of exploring and naming. We have this element of the spies going into the land and exploring and reporting. We have this element of let's research and count and number. But now here in Luke and in the Berean Jews, we see people who are researching to find out certainty and to find out truth. And this is a common thing that those who are involved in missions research lean toward, is to find out things that are certain and true. But none of this really is, this is what researchers do. None of this really is, here is a biblical basis for research. We do research because, I mean, wouldn't it be great if we could turn to Ephesians 4 and it would say, and it was he who gave some to be apostles, and some to be prophets, and some to be evangelists, and some to be pastors and teachers, and some to be researchers. That would be wonderful, wouldn't it? Of course, that's not what the verse says.
No.
A number of times I've had people who've tried to, I don't know whether they were encouraging me or whether they were theologically explaining it to me. I've had some people who've told me that research is part of the apostolic calling because we're looking over the landscape to what comes next. I've heard some tell me research is a prophetic calling because we are speaking truth to power. I've seen some tell me that it is a teaching gift because we are writing orderly accounts and teaching the body what is. I don't know. But then I come back, it's an interesting verse I come back to, is in Proverbs. Proverbs has this interesting little chestnut, 25:2. It is the glory of God to conceal a matter. It is the glory of kings to search out a matter. Isn't that interesting? That God conceals things, and yet he says it is the glory of kings, of rulers, of people to search those things out. Why doesn't God just, why does he conceal things? Why is that his glory? So thinking about that search out a matter, obviously that's part of research right there. I went back to definitions like a good researcher would and thought about what's the etymology of this word research. The word research comes from a Middle French word, which I won't attempt to pronounce. I'm sure somebody on here who knows French better than me would be able to do that. Every time I've tried to pronounce French, my wife, who knows some French, just starts laughing. It is a verb, and it comes from these two French words, one of which means again, and one of which means to search. So to research literally means to search again. And we can kind of tell that from the etymology, from the way the word's constructed. That word to search comes from a Latin word, cercare, which means to go about, to wander, to traverse, which itself comes from circus, not the animal zoo thing, but the word we also associate with circuit, which means moving in a loop. And that's an interesting etymology when you think about it. To search out means to wander and traverse in a loop again. So to research is to seek out the truth. That is what we do. At bottom, at core, this is the job of research. So we can turn to this great research intern, theologian, questionnaire, pilot, who asks, what is truth? And we give short shrift to Pilate at times, but I think he's on to something here. He wasn't very familiar with biblical truth. He probably didn't have the whole biblical history of Israel. It's not a bad question to be asking. It's interesting that Jesus didn't directly answer it. What is truth? Well, first off, research is about the known knowns, true answers for questions. So we can talk about things like, can we number the churches? Can we number the people? Can we have populations? Can we have total counts of Christians? Can we know where the gaps are? Can we know where the unevangelized are? These are all things that perhaps can be known to some extent. They are known. So you can go to the Joshua Project list and you can see lists of all the people groups, and you can go to Ethnologue and you can see lists of all the languages, and you can do filters and searches. And these are all true answers, maybe not as precise as we would like them to be, but accurate, undeceptive answers to questions. Okay, so research is about the known knowns, what we can know. Research is also about the known unknowns, questions that can be truly answered. So there are questions for which we don't yet know the answers, but which we think we can find the answers. And this is what missionary research careers are made out of, is framing up a good question and then launching a research project to study and find the answer. Is this truth? So Jesus said, one little bit here, John 17:17, sanctify them in the truth. Your word is truth. So we can have true answers, but there is a truth. And this kind of starts to get in on what Pilate was asking. What is truth? Jesus says, your word is truth. Then he says, then we see in John 1, the word became flesh, full of grace and truth. So again, we have this bit about your word is truth. And then, of course, the great hymn in the front of John 1, the word became flesh, full of grace and truth. And then we have Jesus again, John 8, saying, if you remain in my word, you will know the truth. And the truth will set you free. So truth is something that can be known. And then, put most bluntly, in the verse that we're all very, very familiar with, of course, Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. So the answer to Pilate's question, which we, of course, know, all of us together, is that it's not what is truth, it's who is truth. Truth is ultimately not an answer, but a person. We have to think about this in terms of the basis of our own work in mission research. Yes, we are about answers to questions. We are about known knowns. Yes, we are about questions that need to be answered, for which we find truth. But our pursuit of truth isn't just about pursuing answers to questions, is it? Research is also about unknown unknowns. The things we don't know. The things that we don't even know we don't know. Missionary research is often about finding and charting and exploring up to the edges of knowability. This is one of the big challenges I often find in research is I sometimes have to tell people that question cannot be answered. Not with any reasonable certainty, not with any reasonable methodology. You can't answer that question. I can't tell you the number of times people have said, can't we just devise a really good survey question that would tell us who the true believers in Jesus are? And I have to tell them, no, you can't. Not with 100% certainty. You can have a methodology that says you will accept certain doctrinal statements or certain things as true believers, but you can't know what goes on in people's heart. You can't devise a survey question that does that. So this is where we start to press into the edges of knowability. So when I think about pressing into the edges of knowability, I come to that other great missions researcher, Job. Job in Job 28 has this great hymn to wisdom, in a sense. And part of it reads in part, do people know where to find wisdom? Where can they find understanding? It is hidden from the eyes of all humanity. It's concealed. Come back to that proverb again. God alone understands the way to wisdom. He knows where it can be found. The fear of the Lord is true wisdom. To forsake evil is real understanding. It's interesting when we read Job. Job's an odd book to me at times, but there's one thing that stands out to me. Job asks a lot of questions. And his friends very quickly give him a lot of answers. And none of his friends are right. And when God shows up, God does not give him a lot of answers. God gives him a lot of questions. One of my favorite bits, it's not my absolute favorite bit, but one of my favorite bits in the Chronicles of Narnia in C.S. Lewis's books is the idea of going further up and further in the last battle. And further up and further in means going further, really, when you think about it theologically, it's further into the mystery and the unknowable. It's interesting that in the book, each time they go further up and further into Narnia, they discover a new Narnia, which is bigger and more real than the last Narnia. Layers within layers of an onion, except that each layer is deeper and more real than the last. That's an interesting concept to think about, that the further you go in, the bigger it gets and the realer it gets. This quote from Nouwen, Henry Nouwen, is one that I've come back to frequently. No man is competent in God. We are finite creatures. Apostles, prophets, pastors, teachers, evangelists, researchers, we are all finite creatures. And God is infinite. And at no point will we ever fully understand God or his ways or what he is doing. To say that we understand God even 0.001% is to overstate our understanding by an infinite amount, because he is infinite and we are finite. There's always going to be things that God is or that God is doing that is beyond our comprehension, or that he actually hides from us, that he conceals from us, that he has not revealed to us. And in fact, one of the things that comes out of this quote from Nouwen is that whatever we know of who God is only known to us because it is revealed to us. And therefore, what is revealed to us says as much about God's character and about his desire for us as the actual revelation does. Nevertheless, it is the glory of God to conceal things. It is the glory of kings to search them out. It is interesting that God invites us to explore. God invites us to search out, to find out more about him and his ways and what he is doing. And so Faithful attention, which is the job of missions research, is wandering around and around and around again and again and again inside a subject, seeking the truth in it. The job of missions research is to seek truth. But part of that is not just finding answers. It is getting closer to the God who is revealed in those answers and what we can know about him, which is never full, and what we can know about his character and his ways and what he is doing. One of the things I found in documenting movements, which is very interesting to me, is that I used to think when I was documenting a movement, I'd look at a gap on the map and I'd say, I don't think anything's happening there. I haven't heard anything is happening there. I don't know what's happening there. But as I got into that, as I got into exploring and researching that place, I discovered something was happening there. I have had that happen over and over and over again until I found in my mind a shift. Now my default is that place is on God's heart. That aspect of God's character has been revealed to me in new and very strong ways as I wandered around and around and around again in multiple places and amongst multiple movements. I found that every place I've been in is on God's heart, and he's doing something even if none of us can see it. You find story after story that people are already there responding to the call of God. Dreams and visions or evangelists that nobody sees or work that nobody knows is going on. It might be very, very small, but it's there. I have yet to be in a place where God is not in some way at work. That's part of his character that I've discovered. Not just that I've discovered the work, but that I've discovered God's heart for that place. I think what this tells us about missions research, biblically speaking, is that we are not after the construction of certainty, but a pilgrimage towards someone. This is from that great theologian, ChatGPT. I thought, isn't this an interesting quote coming from a LLM, a large language model, an AI? He says, it's not the construction of certainty, but a pilgrimage towards someone. And I thought, that is true. That is a truth. Out of the mouth of babes. In missions research, what we do is we wander. And it's okay to wander from answers to questions. This is one of the big things of missions research, is getting from, we collect answers to getting to framing questions. And then we move to questions that can be answered. And then we move to the discovery of new questions. And then we move to the unanswerable questions. Because one of the things that I have found is that if God is infinite, then as we move deeper into our search and understanding of God, the deeper we move, the more unanswerable questions we will come up against. Things that only God knows the answer to. If we have no unanswerable questions, I have to wonder just how deep into God we have gotten. How deep into God I have gotten. And then finally, we move from unanswerable questions to the one before whom all questions cease. There's a great line at the end of Job. I have heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. Now he places his hand over his mouth and he has no more questions, no more statements, no more answers, because he sees God. Part of missions research is moving into where is God in the midst of this? Accepting that the closer we get to seeing God, really, the less our questions and our role as mission researchers actually will come to an end, and we will be just in his presence before the one who makes all things right. That's really what I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Much to ponder there.
Thanks, Justin. That was a lot of wisdom in a very short time. We appreciate you very much, brother.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, I wish we had 10 minutes to just sit in silence and contemplate this before our infinite, unknowable, knowable God. Thank you, Lord. Give us ears to hear and wisdom to apply that.